So how long have you been riding and, been a part of the equestrian community? Can you tell people who, may not be familiar with you and your accomplishments, like just a little bit about you? Like,
I was lucky to grow up in Northern Virginia, which, being from there, I'll say with no objectivity whatsoever, is the most beautiful place in the world. I grew up with both of my parents as amateur steeplechase jockeys, both successful and appreciated for it. And I grew up in a world where that sport and the sport of horses and the open country and the party that surrounded it and all of it was the life. There was nothing else. It was about sporting with horses and living the life that followed along. And those were all my heroes, were the jockeys and the good, the quiet horsemen that knew how to connect with, take great care of, and get the best out of their horses, all one and the same. So my parents divorced at an early age, and my mother raised my brother and me in Virginia, constantly on the backs of ponies and then to horses. I was raised and brought to a man by a man named Albert Poe was a big influence in my life. He was the huntsman at the Middleburg Hunt, and I worked under him for years, just learning how to be a cowboy and a horseman, and learning how to take care of horses, and learning how to be a farmer, and everything that I did from that point forward stemmed from that relationship to the horse and my relationship to the land and again all the people that surrounded it. And when I finally got in the right place, I left Virginia and went to Camden, South Carolina in '95 after I'd ridden as an amateur trying to get some business going in Virginia and not getting any traction. And my mentor at the time was a guy named Chuck Lawrence, who had been two-time champion jockey and was now a trainer. And he basically kicked me out of the nest and said, if you're going to be any good at this, you got to go where the action is, and you got to go work for Shepherd. I think he was calling my bluff a little bit. So I went to Camden, South Carolina, worked for Jonathan Shepherd, and that started what was a cascade of success for me. I was champion jockey 2 years later. I was winning grade ones and graded stakes races all the time, and suddenly became like one of the more powerful or dominant jockeys in the sport. And again, as the stakes and the returns got higher and more frequent, you're more willing to throw it on the line. And then the question of injury versus the return on what you're putting out there was never enters your mind at that stage. I was a young man, and I was on the way up, and I was doing everything that I'd ever wanted to do. And I felt like if I died doing it, it would have been a glorious death. I felt completely abandoned to whatever would happen to me on the race course.
what's the general sentiment like in the locker room when it comes to TBI?
Fear, taboo. We've seen it in plenty of our old jockeys. I think the place you are as a rider and an athlete and a competitor, you feel removed and separate from that guy that is, 40 years later, that is maybe depressed and quietly living in his own solitude and in whatever other issues he may have going on. And you're really living like for today and like there's no tomorrow. In my case, you find yourself with like 14 concussions, and it's like, okay, now's the time to doing something about that. I'm starting to feel it. There was only so much sand in the hourglass, and something about the concussions I'd taken early in my career had made me more susceptible to them. And every fall that I took, it seemed like I was getting knocked out, and it was one of those things where I felt like I was racing against destiny almost. It was like I was only allowed to do this for so much and so long, and it was slipping away, and I just kept kind of trying to sneak back in and do it a little bit more and a little bit more, and the concussions kept coming, and I just couldn't ignore it anymore, mainly because I probably could have ignored it and kept going, but at that point I had too many people around me that loved me, and it just looked selfish, and it didn't. I had a child, and again, I didn't know when all this stuff that was going to sneak up on me, when it would really hamper my life, and I didn't want to be a burden on anybody that I loved, and certainly didn't want to take my own life and put that on them, and all those things cross your mind.
Can you talk a little bit about the types of symptoms that you experience, like neurological things, like does it feel foggy, or do you forget words, or have insomnia, or all of the above? I mean, headaches,
No headaches, but everything else you just said I've definitely suffered from. With regularity, things as simple as just say you and I having a conversation, and I can't get through sentences without forgetting what I'm talking about, kind of thing. Or it's very uncomfortable when you're in a room and there's a joke and everybody laughs and you have no idea what they're talking about. And my vision was blurry for a while, energy very low, depression. Those things are all so entangled, it's hard to tell where one starts and one stops, and one's a symptom and one's a cause. And I felt all those things. I felt, thankfully, no headaches. Energy is a big one. You could call it a fog. They exist in the realm that things are so hard to measure, because it's all, from within looking out. And you never know the way you'd be had that never happened to you on one hand, and you try to maybe remember the way you were and see if there's any difference, but it's been a progression, so it was never like you woke up that way one day. It's just kind of like you slipped into the space and this is your new normal. For me, like, the biggest marker is anger and temper, and that's been an issue for me, and it's been something that I've felt like I didn't have control of, or was controlling of me a lot of times, and was ruining a lot of things for me. I was overcome with depression and humility and a sense of despair, and truthfully, looking back, I think there was a lot going on in my life. It was the effects of another concussion. I saw at that same time, I came home from Saratoga, and immediately on the heels of that despair, saw the Frontline special that led to the movie about the concussion movie. The doctor up in Boston that was doing all the research, and that was incredibly sobering and depressing. And so I started reaching out for help. I got to a real low point in my life after a concussion in 2013. I took a fall in Saratoga, which was my last race ride, and I'd retired from professional riding in 2003, but yet, like I say, I'd come back out of retirement, and I'd win races and stakes races and Saratoga, and just really fun stuff I felt like connected.
So how many sessions have you done?
Nine sessions of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. It's been twice a day since Monday, and today is Friday, and I've got one more to go. So that'll be 9 as of right now. And they each last about an hour and a half, and for what it's worth, I'm told that I'm at about 16 feet of ocean water, which feels pretty darn good when you're in there, honestly. The first couple days, I think I was just overwhelmed by being here, and everything, everything was kind of a sensory overload, and everything seemed like, I can't believe this is happening to me. And then by day 3, I was able to quiet that part of myself and be more observant. And the first thing that I felt like I was noticing is that I had more energy, and I felt like I had just a cleaner, sharper, I don't know what the word is to say, but I more energy is the way that I could best describe it. And along with that, for me, comes like every sensory experience, from my hearing to my sound to just I feel a little bit crisper on being aware of what's going on around me, and those are all things that I've been certainly working on and opening up to with all my other mindfulness practices. And suddenly I feel like that stuff is bumped up, all of it is bumped up noticeably. It's something that people wouldn't necessarily notice about me, but something I notice about myself. I've had some slurring speech problems from my head trauma, and I've just over the course of the week I feel like that's gotten better.
So when you first saw the chamber, what was the first thing that you thought? Because they can be a little intimidating.
Yeah, it looks kind of Orwellian in there, like we might all be part of some government experiment. What did I think? It looks like something out of X-Files, like hatching clones or something, like some sci-fi experiment. But I quickly, my mindset quickly shifted to seeing that time I spend inside that tube, and every breath feels like sweet nectar to me. I swear, I know that you can't get in any more or less by how you behave in there, but it feels like you can, I swear I can feel when the oxygen is coming in there, and you can feel it on the back of your nostrils and down into your lungs, and it feels really good.
If you had the opportunity to come down for a month and do a full 40 sessions, is that something that you'd be able to even work into your life if you had time? Or
there's probably for that kind of thing, I'd have to make the time, because I think it's as important as anything that I do is my brain health going forward. Again, when we have a horse that has a tendon or a problem, you stop and you do whatever you got to do to make them right again. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm going to treat myself like the best horse in the barn and then go, nah, that doesn't really matter. No, I would do that in a minute. I could prioritize that, and I would feel like it would be well worth it.